I'm doing everything but that salmon cat ranking her. Okay, look, I am working on it. It's just, I've never been the biggest salmon cat fan to begin with, so I've been kind of putting it off, and honestly the more I read about how the show even came to be and everything surrounding its existence, it's just really tainted my perception of it, which is so disappointing considering how much nostalgia I have for that show. But I will do the ranking. I'm trying to set all of that aside. It's coming, I promise. But hey, while we wait, what's the next best thing? Well, there's this Nickelodeon movie called Best Player, and how is that relevant? Because it stars Jennette, McCurdy and Jerry Trainor. Yep, we've officially reached an all-time low. Best Player is a movie that came out in 2011. And yes, it's about gaming, of all things. And it's definitely a movie that exists. Why I decided to watch it? Honestly, it was totally out of the blue. I'd known about the movie for years, but never really felt curious enough to check it out, especially considering Nickelodeon's track record with movies. But for whatever reason, I finally bit the bullet. I figured, how bad could it be? Plus, I had just rewatched all of iCarly, so I was in a bit of a Nickelodeon mood. It just felt right. And yeah, it's not great. I honestly don't get how filmmakers can still be so disconnected from the gaming world. Like, how are gamers never accurately represented in movies, especially in one where the entire plot revolves around them? Okay, to be fair, this movie did come out in 2011 when competitive gaming looked pretty different from today, but still, my god, I cannot take this movie seriously. The movie opens with some really bad gameplay footage of what looks like an MMORPG or something of that nature, and we're told that this guy named Q is apparently the best of the best. We learn that Q, real name Quincy Johnson, is this quirky, childlike adult, basically Spencer Shay, but instead of making sculptures, he plays video games all day. He's actually pretty well known in the competitive gaming scene, but he's also broke, so not exactly what you'd call a professional player. Why I'm analysing this so deeply, I have no idea. Anyway, Quincy does food delivery on the side to make ends meet, but otherwise he just plays video games 24/7. And honestly, I kind of envy that. I too would love to live a guilt-free, unemployed lifestyle. Good for you, Quincy. Things seem fine, until his parents drop the bombshell that they're moving to Florida and selling the house, which means Quincy has to find a place of his own. Quincy says that he'll just buy the house, but his parents laugh it off like he's joking. They're asking for $175,000, so not exactly chump change. He now has to figure out how to come up with that kind of money pretty quickly. Luckily, one of his gamer friends, Wendell, who for some reason is always sitting in a hot tub, tells him about a new game called Black Hole. Apparently, there's an upcoming tournament for the game, with the grand prize for the winner being $175,500, enough to cover the cost of the house. What are the odds of that? I also couldn't help but notice that the gameplay footage in the Black Hole trailer Quincy watches is literally just clips from later scenes in the movie. I get that it's efficient from a post-production standpoint, but come on, it's hard not to notice. Anyway, Q, being the best at video games, believes he's got this in the bag, so he buys Black Hole and starts practicing. The game itself is a space-themed shooter that uses motion controls, and in the film's defense, this was during the era when the Wii was still dominating, so I can't completely fault them for that, but you cannot convince me that Quincy's skills in whatever he was playing before are somehow transferable to a motion control game. In my experience at least, those are basically pure jank and luck. Also, the skill ceiling in this game looks so low. Like, maybe to someone who doesn't actually play games it seems intense, but watching it, I just wasn't buying the idea that this was supposed to be some super high level challenge. Anyway, Q's friends are hyping him up, saying that the prize money is basically in the bag. That is until a mysterious silent player named Prodigy shows up and absolutely wipes the floor with Quincy. Over and over again. After several rematches, it becomes painfully clear that Prodigy is just straight up better than him at this game. Then, while Q's parents are rightfully bugging him to start packing, he says something about Prodigy being a monster, and his mom casually combats this by saying that he's just a normal guy who likes video games too. And that sparks an idea in Quincy's head that if Prodigy is just a normal guy, maybe he can track him down in real life and find out his weaknesses. You know, a totally normal reaction to losing at a video game. Wendell actually thinks this is a brilliant idea, and somehow manages to track down Prodigy's exact home address with basically zero information to go off of. And honestly, the fact that this somehow works is one of the least unrealistic things about this movie, which is definitely saying something. So Quincy hops on a train and heads to San Francisco, where Wendell picks him up at the station, and apparently they're heading straight to Prodigy's house for the element of surprise. Quincy's not exactly thrilled about that plan. He goes through with the plan anyway though. When a girl answers the door, she mistakes him for her mom's internet date, which he goes along with. As he's waiting for the mother, he finds that Black Hole is being played in the other room, and what do you know, Prodigy is that girl. Both Wendell and Q are shocked at this revelation because girls are horrible at video games, etc., and Quincy wants to abort the mission. Wendell tells him to stick with it and go on the date with the mom. As Wendell motivates Q over the phone, the actual internet date shows up. Wendell decides to handle this situation himself and starts performing some karate moves on the date, and for whatever reason the guy is like super unbothered by it. Like seriously, where is your fight or flight instinct? You're really not that guy. Of course, Wendell ends up taking him down. Quincy tries to leave, but Prodigy, who we find out is named Chris, pretty much kills all of Q's self-esteem while explaining how he isn't her mom's type at all. A very Sam Puckett thing to do, I might add. But she is interrupted by the mom, Tracy, who's now ready for the date. Tracy somehow does not suspect Q at all and actually believes him to be her date. Like, I'm sorry, but the two guys don't even look alike, and surely they discussed occupation or things of that nature beforehand, right? I realize that trying to make sense of anything in this movie is a losing game. Quincy takes Tracy to laser tag for their date, which to be honest looks pretty fun, but I don't think any gamer has ever said, "I need to set a perimeter! Re-engage via rearguard action!" What? It's really giving hacking into the mainframe. Tracy asks about Quincy's job, which he doesn't have an answer for, and so asks Wendell for help. And he tells him to say that he's a home ec teacher. Oh, and Quincy also suggests to Tracy that she should take video games away from Chris, a surprisingly smart strategic move, and she says that that was already her plan if Chris brought home another F from school. After the date, Tracy was actually pretty charmed by Quincy, much to Chris's dismay, though I don't exactly blame her. Wendell and Quincy consider the mission as a success, and Q stays over at his place. In the morning, Wendell tells him that he actually is a home ec teacher with a PhD from Harvard, and he's working at the same school where Chris attends. How he's done this, I've got no clue, but hey, let the story cook, I guess. It worked in School of Rock, how could it not work here? Come to think of it, School of Rock had Miranda Cosgrove in it. It's not far-fetched to assume inspiration was taken, right? Anyway, he sees Chris at school, and we find that there's this bully called Cindy who doesn't exactly see eye to eye with her. Chris seems to have a bit of a crush on her boyfriend Ash though. There's also this kid Sheldon who's a bit of an outcast who also gets bullied. I don't know, the school stuff in this movie I'm not too into. I just feel like I've seen this kind of stuff play out a million times. Turns out that Quincy, or Dr. Johnson, is the home ec teacher of Chris's class, and she is very quick to pick up on how unlike him it feels. They do a class on poultry, and the more I watched this scene, the more I realized I have no idea what home ec even is. I think in general the US school system seems so foreign to me, no matter how many times someone explains it, and that obviously applies to terminology, like homeroom and home ec, apparently. I think the closest thing to home economics that we have in the UK is like food tech, or just technology in general, but I'm not sure it's entirely the same thing. It seems like a pretty practical class to have though, and I'm not exactly critiquing its existence. It just completely caught me by surprise when there's a class of kids tenderizing chicken in this film with zero context. That same night, Wendell and Q decide to break into school to sabotage Chris's science project, so she can get an F and can no longer play Black Hole, and while she's presenting it, an explosion is formed through the mixture of baking soda and vinegar, and it fills the entire class with bubbles. Q and Wendell celebrate, but they run into Tracy, and Q gets invited round for dinner. Also, it turns out Chris actually blew the teacher away with her project, quite literally, and she gets an A+. This, of course, means that Prodigy has full permission to participate in the qualifiers, and Q is back to square one. At Wendell's place, he's sulking around, but after power goes out, Q remembers that he can find a way to cut the power for Prodigy so that she's unable to meet the points threshold in the given time, and luckily he's been invited to dinner that same night. Q shows up with Wendell in his ear, and the date is very much romantic, and so the plan is a little more difficult to pull off. Still, he manages to turn the power off in Chris's room after Tracy heads to the kitchen, but she just uses her mom's laptop instead. Wendell tells Q to unplug the Wi-Fi, and so after another distraction, he manages to do it. Chris comes down to complain, but her mom suggests that she use the neighbor's Wi-Fi instead, which actually works. This doesn't matter anymore though, because Q actually likes the way the date is going, and it's a mutual feeling for Tracy. Though her saying, "You listen," which is huge, is a little bit confusing because on this date he's done everything but that. But hey, I digress. The two are about to kiss, but are interrupted by Chris, who has now qualified for the finals. Quincy decides to head home after realizing that he still needs to qualify himself, and quickly gets 100,000 points just in time. We also find that Wendell has also qualified himself, while Q was on his date after his plan to sabotage Chris completely failed. Wendell tells Quincy to lock it in, which gives him the idea to get Chris distracted with a relationship too, so that she also loses her edge like he did. I love that they play with the idea that as soon as a gamer gets a girlfriend, he's automatically nerfed. I guess it kind of applies to contexts beyond gaming too, but I did kind of find it funny that they mentioned it at all. Anyway, luckily for Q, prom night coincides with the tournament day, and so if Chris gets a date to the prom, it's a guaranteed win for Quincy. At school, Quincy gets a call from his mom, who's packing his stuff up, and my god does it hurt to watch the dad take out the action figures from their boxes. I'm not exactly a collector of figurines or anything like that, but damn, that feels illegal. The purpose of this call is to tell him that someone is actually looking to buy the house, and so the pressure is on for Quincy to win. In a lesson about fortune cookies, the girl Cindy from earlier tricks Chris into thinking her boyfriend Ash is asking her out to the prom, and before she can publicly humiliate her, Sheldon eats the note. Q talks to him after class and tries to find a way for him to ask Chris out, since it's obvious he has feelings for her, but turns out Sheldon is basically hopeless after going through some pickup lines with him. Also, that's assault. He tries out for football to impress Chris, and Q gives him some last minute advice. He tries the cold approach, but gets wedgied instead. He has kind of a redeeming moment during the game, but that doesn't last very long either. Q realizes that Sheldon won't cut it, and that Ash has to be the one to ask Chris out instead. That night, he's playing against Prodigy in the game, and so takes that as an opportunity to call Chris, who completely violates Q, of course not knowing she's speaking to him, because of how easy it is to beat him. He diverts her attention away from the game though, and tells her that he's picked up on her feelings for Ash, and that she should just go for it. But she isn't feeling too confident. So he sets up a field trip for the class at an arcade, and the two play a couple games together and are having fun, but Cindy ends up unplugging the machine. Ash storms off and Chris follows. Ash confesses that his relationship isn't that great, and he's had more fun with Chris than he has ever had with his girlfriend, and he asks out Chris to the prom, which she of course agrees to. Okay, look, I get that this is supposedly a huge win for Chris, and I do agree that she does get on with Ash, but at the same time, he really shouldn't be doing that if he hasn't actually broken up with his girlfriend. You'd think the movie would actually, tackle that, but this is the last time we see Cindy in this film. And believe it or not, this is not the only instance of this film completely ditching a plot point without concluding it. But we'll get into that in just a second. Meanwhile, Q and Tracy are having a blast at the arcade as well, and Chris tells them the good news. Everyone's super cheery, and back at home, Quincy reassures Chris that there'll be tons of tournaments in the future that she can attend, so missing this one for prom is no big deal. But while checking to confirm this is true, he accidentally clicks on a page confirming him to be Q. And we've hit the climax where his plan is revealed, his relationship with Chris and Tracy is ruined, and is swiftly kicked out with Chris promising to beat his ass at the tournament. To be honest, the film did of course have to get to this point eventually, and we as the viewers did sense that, but the way it's executed here is far too rushed and abrupt for it to have any kind of emotional impact. I am not exaggerating when I say it takes about 20 seconds for Tracy and Chris to go from celebrating with Q to absolutely despising him. The pacing is so incredibly odd, and the way Chris finds out Quincy's identity too is so absolutely random. We've seen from the scenes of her playing Black Hole that she very much knows who Q is whenever she fights him, but she never thought to look him up? Like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense whatsoever, and it's a bit of a shame to be honest, because the movie does get you kind of hooked before this point. To make things worse, very shortly after, Wendell revealed his true intentions as well, that he's been practicing to win the tournament himself, and so Quincy has been double-crossed, and now has no place to stay. It's all just a bit messy, and any care I had for this movie is tossed right out the window. Anyway, Quincy, playing on a school computer now, tries to speak to Prodigy in-game to get her to realise that Ash did actually ask her out to the prom. He has this monologue that she shouldn't mess up like he did with her mother and become an absolute loser in life, etc. All very meaningful, and Tracy overhears this, somehow despite Chris wearing a headset. However, Chris doesn't entertain this apology and doubles down on her beating him at the tourney. Also, that's assault. Again. We then get to the actual tournament day where Wendell, Quincy, Prodigy, as well as some others play against each other. I'll admit the setup is pretty cool, but man, the editing really lets it down. Like, at some points we do see how this wide shot is supposed to look, but at others the editing team must have forgot or something, and so you have the players just looking a bit goofy. Like, how do you even miss this? Moving on, the fights start to play out, and they also just look kind of dumb. Basic gist is Prodigy, Q, and Wendell dominate, but there's a last minute competitor making it halfway through, and it turns out to be Sheldon, who is also a pro at this game somehow. He beats someone, and it's now just the four of them left in the finals. But Q interrupts and confesses his love to Tracy. Wendell tries to do the same to make it seem like smack talk, but Tracy gets the message anyway. The round starts and Wendell tries to team with Q to get Prodigy out, but Q fakes him out and gets Chris to win by sacrificing himself, getting Wendell out in the process because he realizes what truly matters. Prodigy is the winner. But not really, because Sheldon, or Shellshock he goes by, didn't actually get eliminated and he wins. Really easily actually. And no one is bothered by it, even though there's life-changing money on the line, and Q's life is basically over. I get that that's not the point, because Q truly found his purpose in the people around him, rather than in the game, and yada yada yada, and that's the ultimate message. But you can't just build up this whole story about how Q needs this money, otherwise he's pretty much homeless and broke, and then just not address it again. Does he stay with Tracy and become kind of a burden? Does he continue being a fake teacher, which also doesn't ever get called out? I don't understand this. After the tournament, everyone congratulates Sheldon, Ash is in the crowd and asks Chris if she'd still like to go to the prom, and Q asks Tracy the same thing, and that's it. Movie ends with prom pictures. Why was any of what I just watched worth it? I gained nothing, I learnt nothing. Seriously, if the movie had 10 more minutes to wrap everything up, I actually wouldn't have minded it. But the fact it just ends leaving me with a million questions makes me feel like I wasted my time. Okay, so obviously Best Player is a huge mess, and you could just leave it at that. But let's just take a second to look at this a little more deeply. I went into this movie expecting it to have some charm, purely because of Jerry Trainor and Jennette McCurdy. I mean, they played two of the most entertaining characters on one of the most enjoyable Nickelodeon shows out there. But honestly, that's kind of the problem. These characters feel exactly like Spencer Shea and Sam Puckett. And I'm not saying that Jerry and Jennette are one-note actors. We've definitely seen them take on very different roles before. But when you look at it, this movie came out smack in the middle of the iCarly era. And it feels like they were still so immersed in those characters that it just kind of bled into this film. It's not a huge issue per se, but it does make the film feel lazily put together. Like someone just said, hey, these two characters' dynamic on iCarly is fun, let's just copy and paste it here. That said, I didn't hate this movie. It definitely lives in that so bad it's good territory, and honestly, it's kind of hilarious seeing what gaming culture looks like through the lens of whoever wrote this. The charm of the leads makes it bearable, and it's kind of refreshing to watch something that isn't a product of a certain now infamous Nickelodeon showrunner. It genuinely seems like the cast had fun filming this, and that definitely comes through in the acting, and I can always appreciate that. The movie has major pacing issues, and the story has basically no substance to it. It doesn't resonate with actual gamers at all, and narratively it's kind of a dud. But would I revisit this in the future just for a laugh? Honestly, yeah. It's goofy in a weirdly comforting way, and for what it's worth, it's still more enjoyable than that horrid Minecraft movie. Yes, this is like the third time I'm mentioning how much I hated that movie because I need to make it known. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. If you've seen Best Player, what are your thoughts on this film? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Whatever it may be, let me know down in the comments below, and thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you all in the next one.